We are Group 6, and here is our data meeting on artifacts. We met on March 6th at 2 p.m. using Zoom and Google Docs. We were looking at our exploratory questions. We had a rather robust discussion on which one to focus on, looking not just at this week, but what will be asked of us in the future. Which question really has enough meat there to launch an exploration. So our first one, are students with IEPs getting the accommodations to which they're entitled? What's happening in instruction that is affecting the class as a whole? Are they learning things in sequence with spiral review, or are they learning things in isolation? So the first question, we have data for students, some of which have IEPs. We can have other data to do cross-referencing. This is a question with viable answers that you can get just from data without ever actually being in a classroom to observe instruction. The second question we decided was far too broad, and we can't answer that with data without actually being there. Third question was focused just on the instruction piece. Without being in the classroom having lesson plans, this would be difficult to explore, and it'd also be hard to diagnose if this is really the reason for the gaps in data. So looking at the IEP question, you can see by this chart, the students with IEPs are performing significantly lower than their peers. So here's our question, are students with IEPs getting the accommodations to which they're entitled? There's a lot to this question. There was debate as to whether simply allowing the accommodation to occur warrants the change in data. For instance, a student can have accommodation to have scrap paper for an assessment, but if they're never instructed on how to use that scrap paper or graphic organizer, then simply allowing the accommodation will not change the learning goals. So after some discussion, it was rephrased. Are students with IEPs and teachers utilizing accommodations appropriately in order to meet learning targets? So there's a lot of information and artifacts that we can collect to help us with this. First, the IEP. This is essential. It lays out the accommodations the students and teachers should be utilizing. Time logs. Are students getting time with special education providers, therapists? Are teachers able to collaborate with these providers? This should all be logged somewhere. Lessons and unit plans. Are the accommodations being planned purposefully and written into the plans? Student work is helpful. Grades and scores on formative and summative assessments. And standardized test scores. Not to note whether the student is proficient or not. During state standardized testing, students must be given the accommodations outlined in their IEPs. We were interested in these scores because they allow us a data point where we can guarantee a student was given full accommodations. If this differs remarkably from the classroom work, that helps us paint a more comprehensive picture of what happens when the full accommodations are given. Lastly, seating charts, behavior trackers. These would be useful if the student has them. While they may not directly relate to a particular standard, they can help build that full data picture of a student's experience. So here's the artifact list with rankings. Again, the IEPs, the student work, the performance on assessments is ranked very high, whereas the lower ranking things just allow us to build that whole picture of what's happening. We had some reflections on this week. We had some very robust discussions about what makes great questions and how we can answer those questions using numbers. We also had great discussion about accommodations, what they really look like, what they mean, and how they can help students. Our negative reflection was we used Zoom to have our video meeting, and it wasn't great. We had some technical difficulties. So we'll be going back to Google Hangouts next time. Overall, amazing meeting about data, and looking forward to the next one.